A quick overview of what we're going to be covering today. So there's a lot involved with bringing your hearing conservation program in-house. It's definitely not a small task. So we're going to cover kind of what key information is important to know, what to consider when you are thinking about bringing it in-house, where to get started, the impact it can have on your business. This can make a huge impact on your productivity as well as your bottom line, as well as the lessons we learn. There's certainly a few lessons we learned, some bumps along the way. We're over the hump now, but, we want to make sure that people in the crowd don't have to make maybe some of the same mistakes that we made early on. So maybe, Kim, you can just kind of give everyone here a high-level overview of your program. The last time I checked, there was over 20,000 employees. That's a lot of people to manage.
It is. So we do have a large program, and this device has been instrumental with helping us be in compliance. We had challenges before, and our senior leaders had asked us to find a solution to help us because we were spending way too much money sending people to a clinic. So this was a solution that we could bring in-house and take care of that solution. So,
that's great.
But right now we have 110 SHOEBOX devices around the system, and we have multiple administrators that actually administer the testing at each location.
That's great. So can you kind of talk us through what your model looked like before? What was the testing schedule like?
We used an on-site service that would come on site. It was a little bit of a struggle for us, being an airline with a 24/7 operation, being able to get those employees when they're available. It was just it was a huge struggle, especially for our smaller locations where you might have 8 people on a shift, and the chance of getting those people in, 2 half days or 2 days even was a stretch. So we were just spending a lot of costs and a lot of employees' time getting those employees to the clinic to make sure we are getting compliance completed.
Mm-hmm. And that is really kind of the gold standard across the board. That's typically how it's done everywhere, is to try and get everyone tested in a really short amount of time.
Yes.
And then anytime you have a new hire come on board, you have to pay for them to go out to a clinic.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, new hires, if they were available at the time, when our on-site service was there, then we would test them then. Mm-hmm. But that was a hit and miss, and so we were getting, we got better. A while back, we were at 16% completion. We did some improvements, and we got up to about 40 to 50% completion on site, and so the rest of them had to go to the clinic. So that's where our senior leader said you have to find a solution.
Okay. So there's some few stories. I wasn't around when you guys actually found us. I was on leave, but maybe you can tell the group here sort of what the process was, how you found us, and how you got a pilot kicked off.
So how we kind of got notified about SHOEBOX is in Vegas, the clinic in the Vegas airport had reached out to our work comp division, and they had started using SHOEBOX to do on-site testing. And so they had worked out, which they obviously told us about. And so I talked to the people there, and they said, oh, well, we'll only charge you this much to do tests on site, which was a bonus. But if we could do it for free, why would we pay you? So why not just have our own SHOEBOX and do our own testing? So we kind of talked about it, and we had some back and forth communication, and we got one of our own units to test and play with. And originally we were just looking at for smaller locations, but it just seemed to work out so well. It was the right thing to do for our company.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So we'll kind of highlight a few different areas here where SHOEBOX can have a really big impact on your business and just an impact on your hearing conservation program. So, I think it's worth saying that SHOEBOX was originally designed by a pediatric ENT physician, and it was designed for a pediatric population. So this was created with kids in mind. So that's how easy it is. There's 3 4-year-olds that are testing their own hearing on SHOEBOX in a different version of the application that it is more kid-focused. And it was so successful with the pediatric population that we thought, we could probably use this to test adults. So if kids can do it, then obviously an adult population could use it as well. So we made, a little bit more of a sleek version of the same application using the same algorithm. And it's so easy to use that it does require, minimal training. There are state-specific training requirements, but however, for most of the U.S. and Canada as well, the training is really straightforward, and so you can train, your local health and safety managers to administer this testing. The other is, a big departure from the way things are done is we actually bring the testing to the employee rather than the employee having to travel to the testing. So I know for your business, this was a huge difference because you weren't having to have everyone travel to one location or travel out to a clinic, which, as you said, takes about, 4 hours.
Yeah, we calculate that per employee, it's 4 hours plus per employee.
Right.
For them to go to the clinic, not to mention you have to have somebody cover that employee while they're out.
Right.
So,
and that's paid overtime.
Paid overtime. And so, cost is a huge factor. Mm-hmm. Our employees' time and their consideration was another huge factor.
Absolutely. The scheduling, you touched on this being one of the reasons why you were looking for another way of doing your hearing testing. The great thing about this type of application, when you're doing it within your own business, that third overnight shift doesn't need to come in and test during the day. Your leaders that are working overnight can administer tests for an overnight shift. So you're really testing around the clock any day of the year.
24/7.
Yeah.
That's what's huge for us is before we were forcing people to come in, having employees come in on their day off on overtime to get tested, to do the on-site testing, mm-hmm. Or on their day off to go to a clinic. So
right.
It was just not working,
mm-hmm.
and our senior leaders were fed up. So
right.
It's just been a great solution for us, and we're right now about 80% compliant.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that stat. That's really good. The employee experience, I'll be honest, when we were starting to move from a clinical world into the occupational health space, we didn't even consider this factor. It wasn't even on our radar. But this is the feedback that we get from our clients day in and day out, is that the employees really appreciate doing testing in a comfortable office space versus getting into a stuffy sound booth. It doesn't matter if it's on a truck or in a clinic. It's very claustrophobic. It induces anxiety. People are naturally, for the most part, anxious about taking a test, even if it's just for their hearing. And so giving them control of the testing experience is, just takes a lot of the stress out of it. And I think, we talked earlier today about the tinnitus, or tinnitus as you say in the U.S., the tinnitus issue. And how employees, obviously tinnitus is rampant amongst employees or any person who has noise-induced hearing loss, whether it's from the workplace or not. It's just a really common and horrible side effect. And if you have tinnitus and you're trying to take a test in the traditional model where you're sitting there and waiting for the beep and then, hoping you catch it so you can press the button, versus with the SHOEBOX, the employee is in control of the testing time frame and the speed of the test. So if they need to do a long pause to present a tone, or if they need to do multiple tone presentations to see if they hear it, it just reduces the stress. For sure, that test is going to take a little bit longer than average. However, if they do have to redo frequencies, it's only that one frequency that's being redone versus starting over the whole test, which again is common amongst a lot of other audiometric systems. And also speaking on the employee experience, the feedback that we hear a lot is, that's an iPad. There's no way that that's a valid, audiometric solution. How can something on an iPad be valid? We've had lots of, folks, some of your employees who we met in Houston who said, I didn't believe that this could possibly be accurate.
For big, bulky mechanics.
Right. And then he took his test on SHOEBOX and compared it to the tests that he'd received in previous years. And they were bang on. There was virtually no change there. So good things that, it's good that his hearing did not worsen over that year, but also, shows that that test is is a valid test. Furthermore, because we started in the clinical world and then moved into the occupational space, this has been clinically validated against the gold standard of hearing testing as soundproof booths. So there's lots of published papers on our website. If anyone wants to, have a look at them after, we're happy to send them to you. But we have lots of published papers comparing SHOEBOX done in an open room compared to testing in a soundproof booth, and those are equivalent results. We're also being used in, I think, 5 different clinical trials for pharmaceutical companies, as well as being used in about 30 research studies that are ongoing now. So we're really greatly used in the research community, in the clinical space, to make clinical decisions about whether or not surgery needs to take place. So that the sort of standard for audiometric testing has already been really well established with SHOEBOX before we even, came talking to you guys.
Well, and so on the employees' flexibility, and we have, there are always that handful of employees who are concerned, that this isn't valid testing. And we took SHOEBOX through the ringer. We tested through our traditional way of testing and with SHOEBOX. We had a third-party audiologist review all the results to ensure that everything was valid. So we looked at all the case studies. We really did the homework on this to make sure that we were safe, because it's an iPad, and there's that perception that an iPad can't do a hearing test, but it's all about algorithms and stuff I don't understand. But it's all the same, and in some cases we're finding it's more valid. And one of the biggest feedbacks we get from our employees is they prefer this way of testing way better than what we've done in the past, and they don't want it to change. So
testing on a tarmac can be pretty noisy.
It can be,
yeah.
But they like that comfort. They like the flexibility that they can come in, at 2 a.m. and get a hearing test and not have to worry about being there in the morning or in the afternoon. So all of those things have been huge benefits for us.
Lastly, talking about the record keeping, you guys are fairly forward thinkers and have already moved to paperless record keeping, so that wasn't a huge departure for you. But we have tons of clients who are keeping Iron Mountain in business by keeping their 30 years of paper records, as the OSHA reg, dictates. So moving to a cloud-based storage, this is really where technology can be advantageous. It is a secure web portal that all of the data is fed up to, and it just makes reporting really straightforward and easy, where all of your data is at your fingertips. You're not having to dig through paper records. So any of you who are brand new to SHOEBOX and have never heard of us before and just want an idea of what we're talking about here today, I'll give you sort of an overview. There's really 3 main facets. The first being the program management. So this is all the services that we provide in addition to the actual testing equipment. So this includes the audiological review. We have a network of audiologists across North America who are licensed in the states that you work in order to perform the review. We also offer program supervision, so we have KAOX certified professional supervisors that can perform that role for you. Or we can link you up with ones that are local in your area if you prefer to use your own, or you already have an audiologist, in your local town that is already performing those reviews for you. They can do that either through emailed records, or they can actually log into the SHOEBOX web portal with their own secure login and perform a review of the data directly in there. We also have some scheduling management, so this includes reports that help assign when your testing needs to be done, and as well as employee training and a comprehensive customer support team. The technology itself includes the software, the iPad, Class 2 external microphone, and calibrated headphones. And the software really obviously is the key to this whole program. Otherwise, it's just an app on an iPad, and I understand why some people wouldn't take that seriously. But we have about 8 years now of software development that went into this program. So it takes the modified Houston-Westlake, which is the gold standard way of doing audiometric testing, and it turns it into a game. So the employee just has to sort tones on the iPad. There are some There are some blank tones, we call them, mixed in there so that somebody can't just cheat the test. And then we also have an algorithm built in called the React Wizard, which is monitoring for ambient noise. It's monitoring for inconsistent results, unlikely results. It really sort of flags if the employee is having a problem getting through the test. On top of that, it comes in a small travel kit. So you've got some locations that are smaller that don't need their own to live on site. So these can just easily bounce around from airport to airport in your case.
And so when you're talking about the game,
Yeah.
I told you I was going to talk about this. So they have games. And so it's a game. And so a lot of our employees say it's like air hockey, online air hockey. And it's like a disc that you go, you heard it or you didn't hear it. Well, for kids, they have a dog that has a bone in a doghouse. And I said, so for all airline employees that might be in here, I have asked that we have an airplane, and if you have a hangar or a runway. So if you hear a noise, you go to the hangar. If you don't, you go to the runway.
It's on the roadmap, Kim.
So I'm pushing for changes.
Yeah, she is. The good changes. We also have proactive annual calibrations. So typically with an audiometer, you have to send it out to a calibrator, and they do the calibration, and they ship it back on their own schedule. With us, we actually get ahead of the schedule, and we ship you calibrated headphones and the calibrated external mic. And then in that same box that you received your new ones in, you send us back your old ones, and they go into a pool and get refurbished. So we're constantly just cycling through newly calibrated headphones. It also ensures that those headphones are checked for, any sort of loose cables, or it's verified thoroughly before they get sent back out. And then the last component, which is, I would say, the biggest, is really the data management. So this is what's most important to someone like Kim, who's running the program, is not the testing itself, but all of the data that's fed out of there. So within our web portal, and this is something that's updated roughly every 6 weeks. So we have about 40 software developers that are constantly working to improve the application as well as the web-based software. So all of the data is synced up in real time. So the minute you do a test, it'll be fed up to the web portal. And their shift reporting is done on the iPad as well as in the web portal, but that's really where you're generating your reports. So your recordable report, your shift reports, and your scheduling reports. And we'll be building out that as we go. So what it looks like today is going to look very different even in a couple weeks when we have some new functionality that's being launched. We also can do custom EMR integrations. So, for instance, we worked really closely with your SAP teams to feed in the data as well as feed out the data. So once the test is done, where does that need to go? You might have your own compliance software that you want that data to be fed to. So we can work with your teams to do those integrations. So what do you need to think about before you're making this transition? This is, not a small task. There is definitely some challenges that you want to consider. So we'll talk through some of those things that you want to think about. The workflow, the data workflow is hugely important. So, we originally were not feeding the HR data on a daily feed. It was coming in weekly. And that just was not good enough. There's something like 100 changes that are coming in just from your SAP feed alone. New hires, people going on leave, people coming back from leave, people moving locations. I can't believe how much people bounce around in your company. So having that, live every single day is incredibly important. The test records are logged in a system called the Learning Management System. And this is what is super important because it checks off their compliance for the, for that component, for the hearing testing component.
Within 24 hours.
Sorry?
Within 24 hours.
Exactly. So, if they're due for their test and they do it, they want to know, within a day that it's gone off their requirements list and is not showing as uncompliant.
Yeah, and so one of the big factors, a couple of our departments at Southwest, employees actually get locked out if they're not within compliance. So that when you turn somebody's badge off, that gets their attention, and we don't want their attention to be gotten that way. So it helps.
It gets the point across.
Getting that speedy response is huge for us. So we don't have that happen anymore, and that's great.
Yeah. The next component I'll just touch on here is the training videos. So this is an iPad that has a tons of capabilities. So you might as well use it, to the fullest extent. So we have plugged in a link to their learning management system that allows them to click on a button, and it'll take them to their unique system online where they're able to log in with their own credentials and track their training record. So it's just another piece of functionality. There's so much capabilities here. If there's other additional training that you want or any type of media that you want to include, it's an iPad, so there's lots of capabilities there for including that. Another really big one to think about is the import of your historical data. So in the years that we've been working with this market, we've seen everything from really beautiful, complete Excel files to I think they call it ticker tape. Like it looks like a credit card receipt that has the audiogram on it, the audiogram results. Not the easiest to deal with when you are, a paperless system, but we do definitely see, the whole gamut of data. And so having some time ahead of time to understand the data format that you're working with and getting a data dictionary, from the previous supplier certainly helps so that you understand what nomenclature they were using and naming conventions for their different column headers. If you're not importing the same information that you're provided, obviously there's room for error there. So you want to make sure that you have enough time to ensure the data is complete because there's a wide variety of formats out there. The data completion is really a huge factor that we see a ton of across the board. It doesn't matter what our clients were using beforehand. There's always an issue with data being incomplete, and it could be missing employee demographics. They've got a name but no employee ID, or they have a baseline but no revised baseline, or it's just spotty missing data. And probably it's because there's a clinic test that came in that didn't get uploaded, or whatever it may be. There's just a lot of variety there. So giving yourself adequate time to assess the completeness of the data before you launch is, is a very good idea.
Yeah, I remember one of the first emails that I got there was like 500 people with incomplete data, and I went, wait, what?
It's a common issue. Yeah, not just with you guys. We see that with a lot of our clients. There's just tons. And so what that means is if you're missing revised baselines, when you go to run your recordable shift report and they haven't had an updated baseline since 92, the likelihood of their hearing having changed over that span of time is pretty significant. And so your recordable rate jumps up. Well, the employee probably, had their recordable shift logged years prior, but if the baselines weren't updated, that recordable shift is going to show up year after year. So it can be a huge problem.
That was one of those lessons learned.
Lessons learned, yeah. That's a big lesson. So another thing we want to consider when you're making this type of switch is who are the key stakeholders that you want to involve in this type of decision-making program. Obviously, the senior leaders is kind of a no-brainer, but the union, and I know there's some union representatives in here today, this is probably a lesson learned on both of our parts that they could have been involved a bit earlier in the process. Yep. Obviously, they have the employees' best interests in mind, and they are really the voice of the employee. Yes. So it's helpful to have their input early on.
Yeah, and so I will say our largest group's union rep, when we brought him in and we sat him down, he was kind of one of the big burly guys that went, an iPad, really? And so after we walked him through it, showed him, did my presentation, and then had him actually do a hearing test on the iPad. He loved it because he said when he went to his doctor told him he needed hearing aids. Well, his test was way better than mine. I'm like, I think you need a new hearing doctor. So he was like all for it at that point, and he saw how it was workable and better for our employees, so he liked it. So that was awesome.
Mm-hmm. And, with the health and safety team, so there's a lot of people that are involved in the hearing conservation program, so a manager such as yourself, but there's also the health and safety managers at each region that you want to involve. If you're working with industrial hygienists, if you have nurses that are doing the hearing testing already, getting them involved so that they are, feel like they have ownership and have a say in this new technology. The technical teams, this is, again, a big one that you want to include early on in the process. So if you're a big enough company that you have a mobility team that's in charge of your mobile devices and your tablets, getting them involved is really helpful because they are going to have a million questions for you, and we can work with your mobility teams to either use your own iPads or use iPads that we provide. There's a lot of back and forth there. Obviously, IT, the HR teams, any compliance systems. So these are all teams that you want to engage to ensure that if you are planning on doing an integration, that we can get those conversations started early. Data security. So obviously, when you're working with PHI, data security is front of mind. Our CEO actually comes from a data security background, so this is something that is incredibly important in our company and something that is always, at every conversation that we have when we're discussing, transfer of data. The legal team, if you think it's going to take a month to get through legal, you want to add maybe times it by 3. That, when the companies get larger and the contracts get larger, there's lots of time involved, back and forth negotiating contracts. This is, I think, something that we can't escape, even though it's sometimes painful. Certainly something that you want to start early.
And if you're a large company and you have IT security, that is a huge factor. So that you can just times 3 just for that one department.
Mm-hmm.
So,
absolutely.
They take everything piece by piece.
Mm-hmm. And I think, generally there's a lot of apprehension about cloud-based storage. And so it's a lot of conversations about our data security measures and, a lot of back and forth there. We did, get the green light eventually after some long conversations, and I think we're getting better at addressing some of those concerns up front, but it is just natural for people to be a bit apprehensive about or have potentially even have policies against cloud-based storage. And then, most importantly, the end users, so those are the folks who are actually going to be doing the testing, and the employees. Making sure that the folks who are going to be doing the testing have a say or involved and are, excited about the new technology and understand what's going to be asked of them in order to make this type of change.
Yeah, with that, we at our company, we had 5 units that we were testing for a year. And so we sent that out to multiple locations for the employees to try out and see how they felt about it. And it was mostly, I would say, 99% positive feedback from the locations that we sent them out to. So we tested probably 10 to 15 locations to make sure that it was something that we wanted to consider for our company.
And testing it with different departments to make sure
different departments.
They
Yes.
all had a say and had their chance to get their hands on it.
Yes.
And then lots to think about in terms of deployment. So when you're getting ready to deploy, thinking about how many devices you need per location. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you guys set that up.
So, again, for an airline, it's kind of unique. We have some locations that might have 24 employees, and we have others that have 1,500 plus. And so we had to come up with a way to figure out for a small location, we don't want them to have to go to a clinic if they have more than 20 employees. We kind of did the math and felt it was that our cutoff was at 20. So if they had 20 or more employees, they got their own unit. And then originally we set it up if they had more than 700, they would get 2. Well, that number was way too big. And it just wasn't working out for our location, so we moved that number down to 400. And then we discovered that some of our departments, it was harder because they're not really at the airport, so they're off to the site, like our cargo and our provisioning and maintenance. So we got those individual locations their own units. So it was just, we want to make this successful for our employees. And if it's causing them a lot of effort, then it's not really what we planned. So that's kind of how we worked it. If you have a company that is one large company in one building or maybe 2 or 3 sites, it's easy to do other ways of testing. Or you might, you guys had 100, 1 unit per 100 employees, but that just didn't work for us. So.
Yeah, and you can, it's very, obviously you adjust as you go. We're learning, some departments needing their own, so you can downsize based on what's actually working for your business. And then in terms of fleet management, so we use a mobile device management system that allows you to control the iOS, so the device updates, as well as the SHOEBOX app updates as well. And so we're able to control and push those out as needed. Once all your test administrators receive the updated training, then, once we get the green light, we can then push the update. So we have full control of when those updates go out. In terms of the training, there's lots of different ways that we can do this. You guys actually built a really incredible online, web-based training tool. We also offer training, obviously, to all of our clients, and typically that's done web-based, or we can actually come to your offices and do in-person training. There are state-specific regulations, so California, Washington, and Oregon have additional training requirements. And for Southwest, we organized a KAOC course in order to train up all of their test administrators that would be operating out of Washington and Oregon. Setting up the devices, so you'll want to consider if you have a good Wi-Fi connection. A lot of airports, it's pretty spotty, so we went with cellular for Southwest. That was hugely...
lesson learned.
Another lesson learned, because during the pilot you had used Wi-Fi with hotspots, and it's just another moving piece to lose. So going to the 3G iPads, that means also setting up SIM cards and getting those logged onto the devices. So just things that you want to think about when you're getting these set up. And then setting up the actual application on the app, as well as all the settings in the portal. So configuring all of your program rules that we do together with you. And then lastly, on getting ready to deploy, again, lesson learned, is finding appropriate rooms ahead of time. So if you wait until you're launching and then find out that you don't have any rooms that do not exceed the OSHA M panels, then you're sort of scrambling to make sure that you can get a compliant space. So you do have a couple sites out of the 85 that did require some additional noise mitigation. There's things you can do that are quite cost effective, like noise attenuating panels that can just go around the room. So that does help with some of the ambient noise if you are finding that it's still too loud. And then a step further is to actually, you can get these sort of portable glass phone booths that just help. There's not soundproof booths, they're not quite as enclosed, but they do help just mitigate with some ambient noise. So there's just a couple of the sites that you've had to do that.
Yeah, we have 3 that one we put up foam, another one we did the glass booth, and then we have 2 that we did with it's like a phone booth, and they call it phone room. And so it's been working out great, and but out of all the sites, with that just that few needing that resolution, we feel very successful.
So definitely finding the rooms ahead of time and kind of dealing with any sort of noise mitigation at the start before you've kicked off is definitely a good lesson learned. So it's sort of like, let's backtrack a little bit we talked a bit about the proof of concept. Once you had done your pilot at these locations, you ran a cost analysis. What type of factors did you include in that analysis?
Well, we looked at how many employees per location had to get tested, what our previous completion rate was, how many we were sending to the clinic. The clinic cost was our number one factor. And then the flexibility for our employees. So we looked at, again, time spent going to a clinic, and then getting employees and our completion rate, and how we were being affected by not being out of by being out of compliance. So that's kind of how we looked at it. And what really drove it is our senior leaders and the extraordinary costs it was adding to our overtime rate. So that's really what drove it.
Okay.
For us.
And when you say significant savings, what are we talking?
Millions.
That is significant.
It's
then,
profit sharing in my pocket.
It's profit sharing, exactly. That's a Southwest thing that I hadn't heard of before, but what a nice idea.
Yep.
That definitely gets people on board if they're also saving money, if your employees are saving money by the company saving money.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then you also built, I touched on this earlier, an incredible training program. So can you talk a little bit about what that looks like?
Yeah, we took, so we have a training department, and they do a lot of their own in-house training programs. At Southwest, we're very Southwesty, so we like to have our own unique spin on things. So cookie cutter things don't really work for us. So basically what I did is I went through SHOEBOX, and being a simple non-techie person myself, I just wrote down step by step what the process was. I gave that to our training department, and they built a training tool, online computer-based training tool, based on that, what I call a HCP process. And they had just gotten this new software that's really sleek. And so you just click on it, and it just opens everything up, and it's really fast and efficient for SHOEBOX training.
And really interactive. So I had a chance, obviously, to vet it and provide some feedback before it was launched and before it was live. And incredibly interactive, and I think we should think about licensing that software from you because it's really well done.
I don't think that'll happen, but okay.
And then you also held focused webinars with smaller groups to do more one-on-one training and address any questions and make sure that people had, felt really comfortable with it.
Yeah, our employees, anybody in the first year of testing had to go through a webinar with me, and I would walk them through step by step how to use the SHOEBOX. I'm still available to every any employee who has questions. Carl, picking on you. And so we would go through a webinar. They would have to they're required to go through the administrative CBT, which I get a weekly report of who's gone through that training. If they have not done the CBT, they're not allowed to use SHOEBOX. So we manage that very close and tight because we want to ensure that we, are making sure that our employees are properly trained because they're the front face to our employees.
So if we kind of backtrack a little bit to about 6 months before we launched with you guys, a few members of our team, so some members from our software development team that work on integrations and the product management team went down to visit you guys in person and really met with all of those key stakeholders, or many of the key stakeholders that we mentioned earlier. So, the senior leaders, the safety team, the HR teams, the compliance software, your learning management team, and mapped out the workflow of the testing, so what we needed from a product standpoint in terms of rounding out the solution that we had, as well as built an integration plan so that we could ensure that when we were ready to go live, we had your nightly feed from HR as well as the nightly feed out to your learning management system. We then created a roadmap of features. So, we had a pretty good solution for the Occ Health market, but it wasn't hitting it out of the park until we really worked with your team to, expedite some of those items on the roadmap and bring them in a little bit sooner. It really, again, rounded out the solution that we had. So thank you to Kim for speeding up a lot of items that we wanted to do. We just, having the right bandwidth and getting the focus to get them in quickly. And then we had these weekly calls to discuss how everyone was doing in the progress of their projects. This was, again, with all the key stakeholders, all the technical teams, ensuring that things were moving along as required and get updates as needed. During that time, your team developed this custom training module, and then we were ready to go live as of January. So throughout that process, we did make a lot of improvements to the product, as I mentioned. So we've always had continuous noise monitoring, but we wanted to sort of enhance that offering by including a room scan feature so that you weren't really waiting till you were in the test to see if the noise was adequate. So this room scan allows you to test the room before getting started with the test. It functions like a sound level meter, so it has the same functionality as a sound level meter, but if any of you guys have used one, Type 2 sound level meter, thank you, Kim. If any of you guys have used one, it's a highly technical piece of equipment that does require reading a manual, and it takes a while, and there's 100 settings that you have to get right. We've basically taken all the settings that you need to do OSHA-mandated hearing testing and put them in this portion of the iPad, or this application. We also use a calibrated Class 2 microphone that just plugs into the lightning port of the iPad. The other big improvement we made was we didn't actually have a scheduling report at the time. So this is one of the items that Kim and her team said was mandatory for us to get started so that we weren't working off of spreadsheets and doing it the old-fashioned way. So we do have now the scheduling report. So you program in your rules for testing, so how frequently you want to test. And that includes your new hire testing. So we have pre-populated all of the OSHA defaults for when you need to do your baseline test, your annual test, and your retests, and then you can customize that. So if you do have 6 months to do your baseline test, but your company's practice is to do that within 30 days. Mm-hmm. So we've made that adjustment so that everyone's showing up on that report according to your own company's rules. And again, they're always cheated in a little earlier from what OSHA states to give you that buffer in case you are falling a bit behind. And the same goes for retests. So your company's practice is to retest in 7 days versus the 30 days that you have. And that just ensures that you do have a bit of wiggle room there should you be running a bit behind.
One of the lifesavers for us is their customer support team actually sends us out a weekly report of employees who are due. And I set it up to where anybody who's due by the end of that month. So that comes out once a week to our location leaders so they know who's due. In fact, I just got a call today from a station leader who was saying, I should have more people on this report, and they're all showing I don't have anybody due. We've never gotten that before, ever. And so it turns out I called our technology department, and they had them that location set as not active. So all those employees were shown inactive. So we got that fixed today. So that's where the kind of feedback is just awesome.
Mm-hmm. And both sides are able to turn around, improvements when there is an issue like that comes up.
So that's just our teams because, first thing I do is I call our customer support person, and they tell me, oh, well, you have this many people and this many are shown as inactive. And I'm like, wait, what? So that's where I get in touch with technology, and we turn the fix right then.
Yeah.
So
quick turnaround. Another improvement that we made was the ability to have in-app shift reporting. So, as soon as the test is done, you can generate a report, and that will immediately tell you if there's been an STS or a recordable shift. It also gives you the functionality of providing a digital signature. So once the test is complete, you can sign off right in there. And again, this is a paperless record. That record is then stored on the iPad. You can email or print it from the iPad, or it's saved in your web portal as well for record keeping. Quick video to show you what it looks like. So here are the employees signing off. And now handing over to the test administrator. And the test administrator puts their name and signs off as well. Or it just saves a record here and then is saved in the web portal as well. So we've kind of touched on some lessons that we learned along the way, but I wanted to touch on a few here just to highlight, how the importance of them. So getting your leaders that are going to be conducting the testing ahead of time and getting their buy-in is hugely important, as well as locating the testing areas. So do this way ahead of time so that you're not surprised by not having a room that's quiet enough, at your location. The other is the rollout schedule. So if you want to launch across all the board at once, there is always some bumps along the way, and so it's good to sort of start a little bit earlier and give yourself the flexibility to kind of work up slowly. Obviously, if your annual testing was done in January before, you always want to prioritize those ones that are due, and then work through your schedule that way. The other thing that we've been doing is, previously you guys tested everybody within the first 6 months. Mm-hmm. And that can be very difficult to repeat on an annual basis, because now you're going to have the same issue. You're going to have everyone that needs to be tested in a short amount of time. So within the first year, the employees then move to either a date of birth or a date of hire schedule. That does mean, there's going to be a portion that are going to have 2 tests within the first year, but then next year you've got this nice spread out testing schedule. It's just a lot easier to manage.
And all of our locations except one have gone to the date of birth.
Yeah.
And so it is a little bit of a challenge for our employees, because that's putting them to where they have to test twice in that first year. But that gives us 12 months of testing schedule versus a week or max 2 weeks. So it just is, it's more beneficial all the way around for us.
Mm-hmm. The other is verifying the data before you do the integration. So in your case, we kind of got the data and had about a week and a half to review it for its completeness, sanitize the data, and then get it live in production in your systems, in your portal. There is, as I mentioned earlier, it is a rampant issue that data is incomplete, and our audiologists and our review network actually sanitize the data going forward after we've learned some lessons here. We do that in order to ensure that all your baselines are up to date, and so you're not going to have a surprise, increase in a spike in recordable shifts. The other benefit is that if you did use SHOEBOX for a while and then move on to someone else, you would have a really clean data set. We make it really easy for you to export your data. It's always available to export via the web portal. So lastly here, I'll just want to say a big thanks to Kim and her team. Southwest are definitely forward thinkers in the industry. There's a lot of parts of the hearing testing, hearing conservation industry that are stuck in the 80s. And, this company has done a really good job. They're always, I would say ahead of the curve. There's lots of case studies about their company culture. And, I think this is just another example of where this company are really forward thinkers and sort of pushing the boundaries and bringing hearing conservation into the 21st century. So now that we're done our spiel, I'll open up to any questions from the crowd. What we got one here? Hi.
Yeah, I'm from American Airlines. I'm the technical safety coordinator there. And I got a lot of questions. First of all,
Okay.
You're talking about a quiet room. I know OSHA requires that the room be tested.
Yeah.
So are you having designated rooms or areas to be tested?
Yeah, so if you can go back to that one slide that shows the scan.
One more. There we go.
So if you see over there with the microphone, so they use that microphone to scan the sound level of that room to meet the OSHA M panel. We maintain a log of all locations to ensure, which I have found out today that it's actually on the test results what that N panel is. So if they send us a scan that doesn't meet that, they can't use that room. So they have to have a room that meets that N panel.
So that would include distraction as well, right?
Well, yeah. So we have that as part of our training, that they have to ensure that they've turned their phones off, no talking, just like if you were in a sound booth at a clinic or other means of testing. So you don't go into a booth anywhere and do talking. So this is no different. No, go ahead. We got time. We train administrators, so we have supervisor level and above that administer the testing.
That brings up a lot more questions now. That's any supervisor can pick it up. And my understanding of OSHA says that these tests have to be explained to the employee.
They do.
So
So what we've done on the test results, I don't know if you have that on your screen, but it has a colored chart that shows them where they are on their hearing level. So it's really self-explanatory, but we walk the administrators, I call them administrators, through how to, we don't expect them to be audiologists by any means. But on the test results, it'll say you have regular hearing, mild loss, moderate loss, severe loss. I'm actually down in severe loss, so I did my test about 30 times to make sure I got it up. So we don't expect them to go out there and be an audiologist by any means. But so we have the test results come out so where it's very self-explanatory. And so we talk to our employees, and it allows us to have those leaders have those conversations with the employees about ensuring they're wearing their hearing protection whenever they're in an elevated noise area. And so we don't expect employees to go out there when it's crickets, hearing crickets, to have on hearing protection. If they're in an elevated noise area, wear your hearing protection, because I can tell you at my age, you don't want to have hearing loss. So we want to make sure our employees are taking care of their hearing. So this way it's getting those leaders involved, which OSHA requires that if an employee has a shift, that leader is talking to them, coaching them about that shift, making sure they're wearing hearing protection, making sure they're wearing it correctly, and how to insert it correctly. So we make sure all those things are covered during that time.
So to piggyback kind of off of some of Mike's questions is the room tested before each person gets tested?
No, they tested. We require that they do a test, a room scan, about once a week. But the iPad actually does background sound level testing the entire time of testing.
Throughout the whole test.
So just like a sound that if the noises are elevated,
It would show.
it would shut off.
It actually,
While the testing
exactly.
until the noises go below.
You nailed it, yeah. So it actually flags. It'll flag the person who's in testing, and it'll say, hey, there's some noise here. Is it, a chair that's shifting? Is it a fan? It'll give some indication as to common issues of noise, someone coughing, someone talking outside. And if it's continuous, it's actually going to flag and say you need to get the test administrator here. We might need to pause the test or move to another room or address the noise.
So the microphone is in the iPad.
Those are two different microphones.
Oh, okay.
So the iPad microphone is what determines
Exactly.
the ambient noise during testing, and it'll come up with room 2 noise, administrator input required, and it'll come up with a signal that says room 2 loud, room 2 noisy.
Yeah.
So the employee will have to redo that frequency. I know we're getting...
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I understand. But what is your booth again?
5820. Yeah, and we can hang around and chat with you guys outside if people had more questions.
And they've got this cool little iPad and device here that you want to take a closer look at.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, Julie's shutting us down. Thank you so much, Julie, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you, guys.